Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this morning's coffee talk. My name is Sean O'Brien. I'm the president of QuickRate. And as always, I'm pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks again for our joining us for our June installment of the Coffee Talks. My name is Steve Huntington. I'm the director of analytics here at QuickRate. Spent my entire career working with community banks around the country, and been over here with Sean for over a decade now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Just a reminder, use the Q&A box and the chat feature. We'll monitor those throughout the discussion today and certainly take those either in the midst of the conversation or certainly at the end. But we'll always certainly try to get to and answer and address any of the questions that you might have. Again, just, I think, midway through the year, I think, a lot of the topics we've discussed and continue to discuss, we'll touch on here this morning. I know as we get ready for, June 30 call reports, we'll touch on a little bit of just updating new scenarios so that before we, talk again in July, you'll have probably many of you will have, put your finishing touches on your second quarter scenario. So, certainly ask any questions as you prepare for that. But, again, I think at this point, I think, most of all of you are obviously transitioned very well. And, now we're just looking to continue to fine tune, our processes as we move forward. And honestly, that's what, we're trying to do even with the tool is try to, kind of take a fresh look and just try to find areas either that, you have suggested or that we think, can make your, process much more effective. So, as always, to get started, we're just going to start off with a couple of polling questions, just 3 today, but I think kind of timely. So the first question is, will you be traveling for the 4th of July? Just a single yes or no question.
These are the important questions that we all need answered.
Critical to preparing your
while we have a captive audience.
All right, so thank you for answering those. So most of you won't. 75% will stay home. 25% of you will be on the. Oops, I didn't share that. Be on the road. There we go. So all right. Well, thank you for playing along with that one. The next question. Get to number 2. Is regarding what you will be cooking. So what will you be cooking for your 4th of July celebration? Hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken, or other? I was worried about making the list too long, but I suspect other might be the runaway winner here, but we'll see.
I don't know. I'm going for hot dogs. But
yeah,
that's a more of a personal
preference. Yeah.
You're not going to let me vote, so.
All right, so let me go ahead and end this one and share the results. So a little bit split. Hamburgers and other kind of, winning. So I should have put a write-in candidate there so we could have seen what everybody was going to be cooking. Then hot dogs and then chicken. So thanks again for participating. And let's go to the final question. Will your gathering light off fireworks? So
we won't be reporting these answers to the FTA. So
exactly. So all right, we'll end this one.
ATF. FTA.
ATF, that's right. 56% of you won't be. That's and then 44% of you will be. So, all right. Thank you so much for participating in the polling questions. As always, Steve, we actually do have a question right out of the gate that we'll just take right away. Will you remind me about breaking out ag loans from the other category? Just any thoughts on the best way to potentially do it, and maybe just refresh everybody why we currently don't have them broken out.
Yeah, right now the best way to do that is there's a simple way and then a slightly more time-consuming way. The simple way is just to create a custom risk pool or a custom loan pool at the bottom of the loan portfolio summary tab. You can add in a custom risk pool and you can plug in any sort of loss expectation for it and then back out any balances that come from the other, a segment that you're pulling from, right, to create this custom segment of ag loans and do it that way. That's the quick and dirty way to do it, so to speak. If you need a huge amount of detail on the ag and you want to go back in time quarterly all the way to the beginning of look back periods and recalculate the losses and do all that historically, then you would use our Excel based audit tool, which pretty much is a complete replication of the entire historical analysis tab, but in an Excel environment where you can update and manipulate individual call report values going all the way back in time to back out ag loans from the additive segments. And that's the key word there for ag loans is while we've always had balances for ag loans, right, on the call reports, the challenge is the reason why it's not offered as a discrete segment is going back in history. It has not been discrete from a loss and recovery standpoint. It has been a memo item on the call report when it comes to charge-offs and recoveries and whatnot. And only certain institutions that meet certain thresholds, like are you over a certain size, is more of a certain percentage of your portfolio in ag loans. Only those people actually had to fill out that data because it wasn't universal and we couldn't back it out for everybody for all the periods. We couldn't on a default or automated basis add it in as a discrete segment. However, we're still working on developing a way for you to do that on an automated basis. It would have some caveats and some footnotes associated with it. The peer data would be either incomplete or not completely accurate just because not all the peers have been reporting it that way. But it would give you a head start for those of you institutions that are having to manually deal with that using the tool.
Yeah. And Mike, if you want to have a follow-up conversation, regarding how to break it out or use the add-in tool, just certainly reach out to the team and we'll get something scheduled. Okay. Again, as I mentioned, right, I think plaudits and plaudits are again extended to everyone. I think everybody has successfully transitioned and found a manageable routine. And so I think what we've tried to do and talk about is just, continuing ways to, build flexibility, not into the tool and just, any friction points that have been, brought up to us from you, the users, or that we just think maybe, as the longer we've looked at it, that, hey, there's a better way to do some of these. So here's a list of just some of the more recent updates and enhancements. Again, none of these impact the actual calculation of the tool, but are really just designed to, give you some flexibility and optionality. Steve, anything you want to pick up on?
We're gonna talk about the automatic WARM import and do a little test drive of it. We previewed that for you guys last month, but I want to show you how it actually works in the live environment. So today we're gonna do a little bit more back and forth between the PowerPoint slides here and just the actual tools, so we can see some of this in reality, and you can kind of get where you need to be and understand how you use it in the actual tool. So if you go to the next slide, there we go. Yeah, so we added this feature recently to help pre-populate. We had a lot of institutions that were saying, hey, you guys are mapping our WARMs for us and sending us this Excel spreadsheet every quarter with all the loan data and all the WARM calculations. It'd be nice if we didn't have to take that data and then separately open up a tool and then, migrate it and type it in ourselves manually, which is always prone for error and whatnot. Was there any way to automate that last piece of the process for the WARMs? And we thought about that. We thought it would be a good opportunity not only to do that for our WARM mapping customers, but for all of our customers, even those of you who are calculating WARMs yourselves or having somebody else, not us, do it. We have a new feature now that allows you to pre-populate your WARMs either with the ones that we calculate for you from your own data or from some of the other resources that we've always provided but never really put directly into the tool. And that is, if you remember, we've talked about it in the past. Actually, if you go back forward 2 slides, we're going to come back. We'll show you that in the context in just a second. So if you remember, one of the 2 ways that we provide you with industry data for WARMs actually comes from the NCUA. None of the bank regulators haven't really stepped into the fray and provided as much guidance on prepayment assumptions by segments and actual WARM calculations for the industry by segments. But the NCUA actually did that. And they hired a third-party statistical firm, gathered up loan data from smaller credit unions around the country, under 100 million or around 100 million in assets or so, and calculated industry-based WARMs that they update on a quarterly basis going forward. Obviously, the only big difference, we talked a lot about this, well, is this applicable to commercial banks? And generally speaking, yes. There's nothing particularly about a mortgage loan from a credit union versus a mortgage loan from a commercial bank that would make gathering up a large amount of peer data about the average maturity lengths of some of these different loan types, especially now that, as you guys well know, credit unions are getting more into the commercial space. Even their call reports are now reflecting the different commercial loan segments, much like your call reports have always reflected, being commercial banks. And so we thought this was, while not perfectly applicable, pretty close and definitely much better than anything else that's out there. And so we take the NCUA data, which gives us WARMs by loan segment using the credit union's call segmentation, and prepayment rates. So whether you want to actually look at the resulting WARM, or whether you say, listen, I've already got my loan data in there, I'm doing a pretty good job of it, I just need some sort of guidance or defense for all these prepayment assumptions, which is a big part of the WARM calculation. You might choose just to take the prepayment data from this study and plug it into your WARM calculations on an ongoing basis if you can't find anything better. So we mapped their call report segments to your call report segments. Most of them are a one-to-one mapping. Some of them you can see here. We had to average a couple commercial or NCUA segments, but this data is one way. So now every quarter, you can open up your CECL tool and choose it would be the third option there, the peer-based regulatory study data, and it'll pre-populate all your WARMs with some actual real industry peer data. Whether it's to get a head start on the process, whether it's to compare to how you're calculating it for a sanity check, or whether it's just to tweak some of your assumptions about prepayments. And then if you go down 2 slides, sorry, the other data set for peer data is, you've seen this before, right? This is something we start doing now for all of the thousands and thousands of CECLSolver scenarios that our users, our commercial bank users have been running. We look at the WARMs that are plugged in for all those thousands of scenarios, and we get average values of them, cleaning it up a little bit, and present that to you guys. So this is not based upon industry guidance. This is based upon the average for all of you hundreds and hundreds of users creating thousands of scenarios using the CECLSolver. And you'll note in most of the segments, it's relatively close to the similar numbers as we see from the NCUA guidance, which is obviously reassuring that those numbers are sort of on track. So now you can scroll back 2 slides, Sean. Sorry, I'm going to test your fingers today. This is how it's actually used in the tool. So right in the loan portfolio summary tab, there's a new green button under the WARM column called pre-populate. You click on it, you'll get a pop-up. It says, hey, select a methodology. Those first 2 methodologies will only be available if you're calculating your WARM with us. We'll take your data, we'll calculate your WARMs, and we'll put the resulting methodologies here. And when you click on one, then you'll get another box that allows you to choose a date, right? If you're doing it for us quarterly, you'll see the last couple quarters in there. We're starting that process now. So if you had us calculate a WARM 6 months ago as of the end of last year, and you want that accessible now, and you don't see it on this list, just shoot us a line and we'll go ahead and populate this with that older WARM value. And then the 2 options on the bottom are the peer-based ones, which you can choose. I think it might be worthwhile for me to show them that briefly, Sean.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
let me share my screen here. Screen 2. All right, so here we are, just a fresh CECLSolver new scenario. I'm heading over to the loan portfolio summary, and there's this new button right here called pre-populate. I will click on it. I will select a methodology. I'm going to go with the I'll go with the CECLSolver user data averages, and then I will choose 331. We'll update this with June 30th, hopefully sometime next week. So it'll be available really quickly in the third quarter. We don't need to wait until everyone's filed their call reports. We know every time someone creates a scenario, what that data is instantaneously, obviously. So we'll gather up all the ones from the second quarter and update this with second quarter numbers. Let me click 331 and click apply, and you'll see all those warm values just changed. And it'll spin here for a second because, again, when you change the warm, it puts in motion a recalculation of the entire tool, right? It changes what historical data is used. It changes the lifetime historical loss rate calculation, changes the expected future loss rate calculation, and everything flows from that. So that happens pretty seamlessly, and we hope that that'll be a really helpful additional tool for you guys. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we'll go back to my screen probably in a little bit.
All right, let me
go back to the presentation.
Yep, let me take this back here. Okay. And just a reminder,
the question, when will this option be available? It is now. It's as of, like, it's been there for 2-3 weeks at this point. And it is available today.
Yeah, and so if you have questions on it, again, certainly reach out to our team and to your, whether it's Mel, Ricky, or Pam, and again, they can walk you through it, or we can just get some time scheduled to discuss
but
it.
But if you haven't, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say a reminder. The adjusted for prepayments only, adjusted for prepayments and the straight line amortization, right? Those reflect the differences in our tool where one takes into account amortizations and one doesn't. So again, just the varying spectrum of.
And I'm going to show that in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
In a few minutes, I'll show you. Those are the two primary ones that most of our users pick. The more conservative one, where you're leading to higher warms, is where we're just adjusting for prepayments and we're not going through the amortization type process. The ones that results in a little bit lower warms typically is once obviously we're taking into account straight line amortization across the board.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So
we've been through these. Yep. All right. So next part, we kind of want to show you guys and walk through what we call our knowledge base. If you go 2 slides down, or sorry, 1 more slide down, that's where it is on the 1 down. This is where it is on the tool right there. So right up top, we had a few blue buttons. We've kind of consolidated them into one larger blue button, which has all the knowledge base in it. If you click on that knowledge base, it's going to pop up with a new tab, which has this kind of comprehensive, organized knowledge base in it. You see the red box there. Something that's not available yet, but is going to be probably next week or in the very near future, is a video resource library, something we've been working on for a while. We're getting a lot more of our users who are going back and watching over our coffee talks or watching over a webinar that we've done in the past because they're looking for some guidance or a refresher on one particular concept within CECL. As you guys have probably noticed at this point, I'm a bit of a talker, so those webinars can go on for a long time, and finding exactly where, if you're looking for a 2-minute snippet, I don't want you to have to watch 45 minutes of me blabbering on about everything. And so we're kind of cleaning up those, creating a bunch of smaller bite-sized video snippets, highlighting common questions, best practices for how to handle a particular topic. And we'll organize those here in the knowledge base. And we'll also put some of them right where you would need them, like on a particular tab within CECLSolver. If you're looking at the unfunded commitments and you have a question about that, or the warm look back modifier, or one of those particular topics, you'll find some of those snippets right on the tab. And I'll show you what those will look like in a second. But our knowledge base is broken into a couple different sections here. Just a basic, some things about methodology and policy. Actually, let's go ahead and share my screen again, because I'd like to click on some of these, Sean.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody, again, as Steve mentioned, right, the videos we just think are helpful because a lot of times it's just easier to see it being done rather than us try to explain it being done. And so Steve has done a nice job of taking those and putting them into these video forms. But also, I would suggest to you, certainly if there's something that you're thinking about, submit it to us. we can work on, sending you a Loom video, and then certainly, adding it to the knowledge base. So, again, if there's something you'd like us to do, just a short snippet on, let our team know, and we can try to get those out there. Because again, I was talking to a bank at a conference this week, and we were talking about the fact that when you're just getting started, we're only touching it once a quarter. Sometimes you kind of forget, different things. And so, repetition is really the answer, but if we can shortcut that a little bit with some of these helpful videos, that's really what we're hoping to do.
Exactly right. So I'm just clicking on a couple of these. There's one additional resource that we're adding tomorrow. So it'll be available next Monday. We've gotten some requests for just like a log or a list of all the changes or enhancements to the CECLSolver tool. Sometimes that's part of the auditing process where your auditing firm might say, I understand you guys are using this tool. How often has it changed? What have the changes been? Although we point out whenever we talk about the changes or enhancements that we have never done anything to the tool that changes the core methodology or calculation method, which is what they're really getting at, making sure that we didn't sell you something and you started using it and then we're changing how all the math works, right? Without you being aware of it. But we still thought it would be helpful to have sort of a running list, sort of like we do at the beginning of all these coffee talks, but aggregated with a date or at least a year in which those enhancements happened. And so that's going to be a link right here come next Monday. But for example, we've had a lot of questions about, validation support and talking about that. So we put together a document here which discusses kind of comprehensively what is the validation process like for tools and for CECL in general, and what role do we play in it. And so it's a 2-page PDF which explains what we're doing in our SOC report, what other tools we have available, like the historical loss data and calculation audit tool and whatnot. So this will hopefully be a place where you can point examiners or auditors that have questions about validation. Here's a copy of our SOC 1 report, which we are finishing updating as we speak, the next, for 2024. Here is the a loss rate methodology sample. If I click on this, some of these are Excel files, right? So I'll click on this and open up the Excel file. So if you have questions about, not about all the specific data, but just, hey, what is the basic way that you guys calculate a lifetime loss rate? So here's just some sample data, and this shows exactly how we would calculate a 3-year for, let's say you have a warm of 3 years and maybe a custom 2.5-year look back period. How are we calculating a lifetime loss rate? And how are we using that modifier, that multiplier, to affect the difference between the length of a look back period, in this case 2.5 years, and the length of the warm 3 years. So this is a great resource for doing that. Methodology. Here are these sample templates. So most of you are probably beyond this point already, but if you're still getting some flack from regulators about changing your policy and using some different language, then these templates can help you do that. This is our Q factor determination support matrix. That's a mouthful. That's just an Excel file. We've illustrated on it a couple times in the past. If you're looking for a better or different or slightly more granular framework for justifying or going through Q factors on a regular basis, this is just a template that can help you do that.
And Steve, I want to jump in just for a second. I was at
Sure.
a couple of conferences this week, and one of the presentations was by an accounting firm around around CECL, and again, just kind of just like the coffee talk, right? Just topics that they have seen, discussed, and the matrix actually came up, not particularly ours, but the idea of a matrix, right? That as a way to just better detail and discuss how banks are thinking about their Q factors. So that's again one of the reasons we did it. It does give you kind of a consistable, repeatable format. It does allow you to have kind of input in how things will change based on assessments. It does give you the ability just to make a few comments about why you're doing something or not doing something. So, again, if you're looking for different ideas or just again, more of a repeatable process with your Q factors, the matrix may be something that is of interest to you.
And again, as we say frequently, when it comes to Q factors, it's points for paper, right? So making notes about what assumption you made and making that note where the math happens so that when someone's trying to follow it and track it and see any, oh, that's weird. I just got booted off. I will log back in. then having a tool that allows you to do exactly that, right? Make notes on any assumptions that you made and make them where the math or where the assumption happens makes it a lot easier to track and answer those questions before it gets too convoluted. Let me head back to the knowledge base here. All right, so I'm checking this. The Fed scale tool is here. It's something we did soon after the Fed created that scale tool. I don't know how many institutions are really utilizing that as their primary CECL methodology, given the I wouldn't say almost overly simplicity of it, but we thought it would be helpful to do that. So we have the scale tool faithfully represented and recreated within our framework that you can create a scenario and save it. You can do it just as a backup or a sanity check to your primary methodology, just to see how it would how everything would flesh out from an ACL perspective using a scale methodology. This right here, the peer data averages or medians, that's that data we've been showing you guys a lot. So you don't have to wait for a coffee talk. As soon as we update this with the second quarter, it'll be right here, and you'll see a running trailing 4 quarters, so to speak, not only for warms by segment, but also Q factors and directionally speaking, and reserve levels at the segment level for all of the hundreds of community banks that run our tool. Trying to think what else I wanted to point out specifically in the knowledge base. Yes, I want to go to the warm estimator tool because we've had an update to that Excel file, not in the methodology or anything again, but since we are offering. So this is what Sean was talking about. If we're doing your warms for you, we're using this same template, this same Excel file that we give you a generic version of. Anyone can use this. You can take this file, you can plug in all your loan data and calculate warms from a number of different methodologies. There's a user guide that explains how you would do it if you were doing it yourself. And then at the summary here, we say, hey, here are the prepayment assumptions that we or you are using. Here's a few different ways to calculate your warms using your data. Here's a couple peer-based options, the ones that we showed you just that are now automated on the interactive tool. And this is what your decision is, right? From all these options, that's the one that you decided to go with, so to speak. And if we're calculating your warms for you, we provide this spreadsheet for you each quarter with all of your loan data in it. And it's just up to you to take these values and pretty much copy them and input them into the interactive tool. That's the part of the process that we've now automated. But even if you're not calculating your warms with us, we're now providing these in the tool as well. And this is where you can find the that same NCUA prepayment and warm data for their segments and for the commercial loan equivalent segments. Everything right here. And so we have just a slight update to this that gives you some more data, whether you are or are not using us to handle that part of it.
Hey, Steve, we had a question come in. If you can go back
Yes.
to the Excel spreadsheet. So the question is, can you put the call code numbers in the category name? It used to be there. So I think within that Excel spreadsheet, I think we may have had in the past, you know, if it was 1A1 or, you know, what have you.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah.
We can add the call codes back in there. It's not a problem.
Yep.
I probably know most of them, sadly, off the top of my head, but that's neither here nor there.
That's a personal problem.
That's exactly, that's my burden to bear.
Yeah, but yeah, we can get those added back in there. That's a good.
Yeah, I believe that's everything I wanted to show. Particularly,
and we had a yes to the call codes in the name, so
oh, good.
Met with
all right, great.
With some satisfaction.
So we may reorganize this in a bit if we have a lot of that video resource library with a bunch of those videos in it, and it takes up a lot of space. We might shift things a little bit around here, but this is always going to be kind of your home base for all those resources. And if you're curious as to one of those clips and what they might look like, they'll be in this format. It's a great tool that we're going to be using called Loom. And it's a video player. So for example, if you had questions about the lifetime look back multiplier, you would click on the link. It would open up this here. It not only gives you a summary description of what we're talking about, here is the actual video of it, and you can kind of scroll around it And we also have a transcript here. So you can follow along as what we're saying. And if something is important to you, and you can highlight, copy, and actual paste text and whatnot from the videos directly into whatever you might be using. So it's a great tool that we're going to utilize more going forward. And you guys shouldn't have any problem accessing it once we give you the video links. All right, I think that is it as far as the knowledge base. Let's go ahead and shift back to the PowerPoint, at least for a minute.
Yep. Grab it back from you. Okay. So again, yeah, we talked about the resource library coming soon. Again, Steve just kind of walked you through the knowledge base, and then again, we'll have that resource library button here coming very, very soon.
And that one there, the one that's just an example of, on each individual tab, you'll have some different videos up there that pertain to something going on in that part of the tool. So you don't have to go to the knowledge base and then search for something. You should be able to find it where you have the question that's relevant.
Yep. All right. So then, we just thought again, it might be worthwhile just to talk about updating scenarios, as we approach here another quarter end. So, we'll just kind of walk you through it and talk you through it. And Steve, take it away.
We've done this before, but it's always a relevant topic this time of the quarter. And I've expounded upon some of these steps and given some additional detail there. So this can be more of an actual guide as you go through it. So we're going to talk about what we see on the slides here and on these two slides. And then I'm going to go real quickly and show you an example of it using the tool. But I think we'll talk it through first and then briefly show it. And if anything comes up in the meantime, please stop us and have if you have any questions. So first thing you're doing when you pull up this is you pulling up an existing scenario, right? Each quarter, when you get new data and when you're calculating a new ACL, you don't need to create a new scenario. You can pull up your last created scenario and simply look in the spots where you need to modify or update it, and then save it as a new scenario. You're not saving over your old one. Each scenario you save is historically accurate as of that point in time, so it becomes a reference in the future, right? But you'll modify and then save it as a new one and give it a new name and a new date. But the first step is updating your warms. How often, that's the question we always get, how often is everyone updating their warms? So most of our users are running the CECLSolver and calculating an ACL just quarterly, right? For the call reports, for your quarterly financials. We have some institutions that are doing it monthly, whether they're doing the whole shebang monthly or just doing sort of a quick and dirty update monthly, so they can provide their board with some estimates of potential provisions coming down the pike, on a monthly or quarterly basis. As far as updating warms are concerned, we don't suggest doing it more frequently than quarterly. Even if you're updating the tool on a monthly basis, a full recalculation of your warms every month seems, in our opinion, to be pretty much overkill. But that's also very, you can calculate that. If you start calculating your own warms and doing it monthly and you're not seeing them change very much, that work, you're probably not getting much juice for the squeeze, so to speak. So when we're doing warms for institutions, we provide it on a quarterly basis. If you're doing it yourself, you might consider how often there are meaningful changes. You might consider updating it semi-annually if you're not seeing the warms change by very much, or just changing the prepayment assumptions. So there is some flexibility, and there is no particular guidance that says you must do it on they just need to be, quote, current, unquote. But that's always the first step, is going in and plugging in the warms. We've made that easier now, whether you're using peer-based warms or the warms we're calculating for you. You can do it using the auto populate button. So that's just become a lot quicker. Second step, entering the current loan balances, right on that loan portfolio summary tab. That's the as of date for your ACL calculation. Now, you're not going to have historical data that goes up to today, for example. You're going to have it up to the last quarter end or whatnot. But if you want to calculate an ACL as of any date, whether it's as of June 28th or whether it's as of a quarter end, that's the as of date for your calculation. That's also auto-populatable, so to speak. If you choose a date on the top, and I'm going to run through this in just a minute, you can choose any historical quarter end date, and it will auto-populate all your current loan balances as of that date. If you have not filed a call report yet, but you're calculating an ACL for June 30th, 2 weeks from now, then you can plug in your own GL balances as of June 30th, and it will save them as your current balances. A note here, don't forget to update any adjustments or exclusions as well, right? If you're updating your loan balances to be as of a certain date, any adjustments to your loan balances, like if you have any government guaranteed balances that you're backing out of your total balances from a reserve calculation, any loan populations or balances that have no risk of loss, you're going to want to back those out. It used to be a more important thing with all the PPP loans and whatnot, obviously, but now it's more just about mostly government guarantees. If you're backing out balances because you have individually assessed loans, that's further on. We won't worry about that. That's done on an automatic basis. You don't have to do that yourself. After you've updated your loan balances and your WARMs, you're going to go and look at your historical look back periods. And I'll show you how we do this here in just a minute. If you've typed in new WARMs, it's going to recalculate your look back period for you. Our most common by far, our most typical user case is that our users want their look back periods to match their WARMs. So if they type in a new WARM, they don't want to have to go and manually update the beginning and end of a look back period. If you update a WARM, it's going to recalculate the look back period to match that WARM. If you've not changed your WARMs, but you're updating the tool, that's when you go and move your look back periods to take into account more recent data if it's available. And again, I'm going to show you all this in just a moment, but I don't want to back and forth too many times between the screens for everybody. Go to the next slide, Sean. Revisiting and adjusting Q factors. So this is something we talk about frequently, and I think we talked about it a good bit last month when we had our accountants on the phone with us. But there is a significant give and take between historical look back data and Q factors, right? If you're using a relatively long look back period, you're more likely going to be capturing some more losses within the historical context. And you'll probably have somewhat lower Q factors adjustments than some other institutions that are using a shorter look back. This is because, well, losses accumulate over time. And over the last couple of years, we've been in a very healthy environment for losses, right? The industry has not been seeing significant net charge-offs. So you probably have a relatively clean recent history. But if you're using a long look back period, you're probably capturing some losses from maybe even the tail end of the last credit cycle. That will lead you to have a larger historical loss rate and probably need to have less Q factors to make up what the total reserve is going to be, right? Conversely, if you have a relatively short look back period and have experienced very little in the way of losses in the recent past, for example, if you're, it's a construction portfolio, and you're using a short look back period, you may very well be relying almost solely on Q factors to make up what you need to have in your ACL, which puts much more emphasis on defending those Q factors and less emphasis on defending a longer historical look back period. Neither of these different scenarios I've just shown or just played out, neither of these options is right or wrong. They're just two different approaches to get to the same endpoint, right? Which is a defensible estimate of expected future losses based on some combination of what you've seen in the past and how you expect things maybe to be somewhat different going forward. Food for thought here, and this is something we point out frequently and I think people miss, and it's important, but have you recently had an expected future loss become a realized historical loss, right? If you always had a high Q factor for one segment because there was one relationship in there that you were a little worried about and a couple loans that you thought might have some issues, and then that loan had the issue, right? You recognized or realized the charge off. And now when you go and look at your tool, you see a much higher ACL reserve required. If you think about that, well, now it's because it is taking that into account in the historical loss rate, but until you change it, it's also still taking that into account in your Q factors. So you should be re-evaluating Q factors, especially when you have a loss. If that loss was sort of expected, right, and it's in your historical analysis, you need to be backing out any additional Q factor adjustment that you made when it was a potential loss, or you're double counting the loss. And so a lot of times your ACL shouldn't change at all, even when you recognize a loss, as long as you had anticipated it. You're just shifting that from expected in the future to happened in the past. but don't have it in both, right? And that's just kind of a process point. Yes, Sean.
Well, and I think it bears reiterating, right? Because again, part of CECL is the expected part of it, right? And so as you anticipate those losses, or as you anticipated those losses, as Steve pointed out, when they actually come to fruition, right, then it makes sense, right, that you would pull those back out of your Q factors because now the loss has been realized, and the further anticipation of that loss is not there. And so again, I think it is a little bit of a teeter-totter, but you know, conceptually that's the way it should work. And so as Steve pointed out, be mindful of not double counting unless you anticipate further losses. But
Yeah.
you know, but if you know, if you have been realized, then you know, make sure you don't double count.
And I think the reason a lot of institutions are wary of doing that is because they know, you know, examiners, they don't like to see negative Q factor adjustments. They don't like to see decreases in your Q factors unless you have a good explanation for it. But this is a watertight example of a perfectly acceptable and justifiable, not negative, but relative decrease in a Q factor adjustment when you realize a loss that you had already factored in using the Q factors. And then the last step here is going through the individually assessed loans. If you have a bunch of them listed out individually using the tool, you're going to update the balance, and you're going to update if you've had a new evaluation of that loan done and you have a different expected collections amount. And then finally, the unfunded commitments. We also have an auto-populate feature in the unfunded commitments, so you can roll the current balances of the unfunded commitments forward to the next quarter, and I'll show you guys in just a minute how to do that. And then finally, be sure to save this as a new scenario. You never want to overwrite or save over an old scenario unless you're only halfway done with it, right? If this is a new ACL calculation as of a new point in time, just save it as a new scenario. We're not charging you guys by the scenario here. So don't overwrite something that you might need to access again in the future. So let's go ahead and just not walk through it, but show you how that looks in real time here using the tool. And don't be shy with the questions if you have any question about this as I go through it. All right, so here I am. I just opened up CECL tool and it's given me a fresh new scenario. I want to go back in time and open up my scenario from before. So this is as of 12/31. So let's say it's a month ago, right? Or 2 months ago. You're in April right now. You ran it as of the end of the year. All this is as of 12/31. And now you're coming in and say, hey, I've got March 31st. I've got a March 31st call report. I need to update this whole thing for the first quarter for March 31st. I'm going to come into here. All right, I see all my warm values. These are as of 12/31. I want to go ahead and update them. So I can either type in the new values if I'm doing it myself, or I can just go to pre-populate and choose the CECLSolver averages. And I'm going to use the more recent, the 3/31. As soon as that's available, hit apply. All right, I've updated my warms. Now I'm going to come here to the balances and say, all right, these are my 12/31 balances. I'm now running this as of March 31st. If I haven't filed a call report yet, I can plug these values, just type in your GL balances from 3/31, and then come in here and type in that date so that you can remember it, right? This is just for reference. You type in that date so it's connected with it. However, since this is obviously after April and we have the call report, you can click right on here and just choose 3/31. As soon as I click on that and click off the cell, now I've just automatically updated all those balances from March 31st. Again, that's only available after you filed your call report. So if you're doing this pre-call report, you'll have to type them in, but then make sure you manually, you type in the date 3/31. This is your reference guide to tell you that this ACL calculation is as of March 31st. This is what I was talking about the adjustments and exclusions. And the footnote explains what you should be backing out, if anything, from those balances. If you're updating your balances, you should be updating any associated balances of adjustments and exclusions. So once you've done those two things, we're going to head to the historical analysis tab. This is step 3. Here are all your look back periods. You can see them visually here. I went ahead when I updated my warms, it switched this. Let me show you what it looked like before. Just give me a second here. When you first opened up the tool, you would see this. You'd say, all right, all my look back periods ended at the end of last year as of 12/31, because this whole old scenario was as of 12/31. But now I've got 3/31 data. It's all available to me. I want my look back periods to include 3/31. If you had updated your warms, it would have done that automatically for you. If you're not updating your warms, you'll have to come in here and tell it, let's update our look back. You can go through each segment if you want to and just say, well, I want it to include 1Q24. And it will, as you can see, just recalculate for that. If you don't want to do that 15 times, you can just click on set common date range and say, I want everything to use the most recent data available and apply the changes. And now everything's shifted to include the first quarter of the more recent call report data. This is also where you would customize lookbacks. Let's say 1 to 4 family resi construction loans have a notoriously short average life compared to other loan segments. We're only taking into account a warm duration. If you want to say, listen, I need to take into account more historical data for these. So I'm going to click on the look back. I'm going to say I want the look back to begin at the beginning of 19. So I'm going to take into account 5 years plus or minus of historical data, even though I have a short warm. Now you can see we've highlighted all 5.25 years for that particular segment. And you can pick, again, any custom look back period duration that you want to using this. But the average user case is going to be you're updating your warms first. And so these things are automatically going to recalculate for you. So really, you're only going to be messing with these look back periods and stuff if you're not updating the warms for this next run, or if you have custom look back periods, shorter or longer. And we discussed that in the slide presentation, why you might want shorter look back periods. I just gave you a good example, or longer look back periods, or why you might want shorter look back periods. If you do a very conservative warm estimate for your mortgage portfolio and you're using a warm of like 11 or 12 years or something, you might say, listen, taking into account losses from 2011 is not relevant. We are twice the size. We have a different management team. We have all different underwriters. We're in a new market, whatever, what have you, right? So you might argue that that's simply not relevant anymore. And you might shorten the look back period to only include the last 5 years, even if you're using a longer warm. Totally subjective, totally up to you. Just make some notes on why you made the assumption. So that's updating the historical analysis. And now we head over to Q factors, where you're going to be making your adjustments here. Q factors, you'd come in here, make a, if you've realized a loss that you were anticipating, find where that Q factor adjustment was made before. You should have some sort of note in here saying that, you made an adjustment of 30 basis points partially because of, an issue, a weakness with one particular relationship. Then you'd come in here, you'd see that, all right, this is what I did last quarter. I'm going to modify that, bring that Q factor down, change it, and then update the note. This is now reflected in our historical experience. I no longer need a Q factor adjustment for it. Save those notes. Those notes stay here, stay attached to that segment, not only in the tool interactively, but anytime you print off, PDF, export the tool, all those notes by segment are going to be attached along with it so you can follow along. Individually assessed loans, if you had some, update them, balances, whatnot. And unfunded commitments, these are all as of 12/31, the current balances. So now that we have 3/31, I can come in here and say, all right, 3/31, click off of it, and boom, these all just updated from your call report for March 31st. If you haven't filed the March 31st call report, you'll have to plug them in and then change this date manually to be March 31st so that you have it as a reference. And that's pretty much all of the steps one by one into how a typical user would take a scenario from last quarter and update it for this quarter. And when you're done, don't click resave, click save as new and give it a new name and a new date. If you try to click resave, we now have a warning up there based on experience. If you resave it, you will overwrite the older version. So you can do it or you can cancel it. Did I miss anything there, Sean?
No, that was good, but we do have a few questions that have come in.
Okay.
So have we considered having a dollar amount column in the Q factors for expected losses versus percentage? So, I mean, I think initially we talked about, I think we thought it was more industry-wide accepted that it'd be a percentage. I think we can probably, revisit how hard it would be to have a dollar amount versus a
I mean, I
percentage.
could try to create a toggle switch or something where it
Yeah,
calculates a
yeah,
dollar amount. Keep in mind, if it's a dollar amount, you're going to have to manually update every single value in this entire page every single time, because a dollar amount means as soon as your balance changes, right? And your current balance, you're going to have a different expected loss dollar amount, even if your Q factors haven't changed, even if your warms haven't changed, even if your loss rate, if nothing has changed, you're still going to have to manually update every single value here as soon as you have a different balance. So it's much easier or straightforward to say, 1% is 1%. So if my balance is increased and I need 1%, it's still 1%. And it just calculates, you get the dollar amount obviously here in the implied amount. But I can see where it would be helpful, maybe not when you're calculating Q factors, but just when you're seeing what dollar amount of my total reserve is coming from, what I experienced in the past versus what I expect to be better or worse going forward. So
yeah.
I would use it more as a reference and not how I actually calculated Q factors personally. But that's a good point. And let me see if there's a way for me to have a little percentage dollar toggle up here. So you can, it would default to percents, but then it would calculate what the dollar amounts are based upon your current, it would connect this loss rate, the Q factor loss rate with the current balance, and then just do a simple math to give you a dollar amount. I think that's the way that would work.
Yeah. So we're not going to change the percentage, but we will consider, putting in a toggle.
Yeah.
Thanks for the comment, Joan. Okay, so the next one is regarding the data in the warm template. Comment on the disparities between loan level data and peer-based data. I don't know that it's a disparity, it's just an option, right? So if I'm reading that question right, the loan level ones are your unique data. The peer data, again, are just there for optionality. Steve, anything?
I was sorry, I was trying to make a note of the last
the
idea.
toggle,
So
yeah.
can you read it one more time for me? I'm sorry.
Sure. Regarding the data in the warm template, I'm assuming they're talking about, within the Excel file of the pre-population. Please comment on the disparities between loan level data and peer-based data. And again, I don't think
loan level data is you calculating loan level data means we're using your loan data to calculate your warms. The peer-based data just means if I want a warm value, but I don't want to collect all my loan data and do a real warm calculation using all my individually loans for that particular segment, if I just want the peer average, it's going to give you an average of all the other banks that have calculated warms. So you're getting an average of all their loan data pretty much, right? As opposed to using your own data.
Yeah. And Mike, I'm going to come to your comment in the chat here in a second. Have you considered notes for historical analysis for look back adjustments?
Notes here?
Yeah.
We continue adding notes in different spots. I think we added notes there, we added notes here, and we added notes there. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think
this notes here.
Yeah.
And I kind of typically, since this is organized by loan by call report segment here, that you can kind of get that by putting a note here on the summary tab. If it's a conversation about historical value or about an adjustment or about a look back period, then as of now, you would make the note here on the loan portfolio summary tab. But I'm certainly not against adding that a functionality to this tab as well. I'll make a note of that and see if there's anything that would cause problems with that. But another good point.
I'll let you make your note, but then I'll read the next question here. How do you determine the ranges for Q factor adjustments, 10, 20 bips, et cetera? So again, that's going to be unique to every institution. Again, I think, depending on how much of a range you want to give, I think
I'm going to open that up while we're talking about it, because I think I know where that's coming from, and it's just it's a plug. It was a random plug by us to give you a starting point. There's no intelligence behind those specific numbers.
No, but I think the idea was to go beyond just a range of moderate excessive, et cetera, that you could kind of quantify your own ranges and loss rates. And so again, as Steve pointed out, no silver bullet there, but really just gives you the ability to be a little bit more granular and again a bit more consistent, based on the ranges that you want.
Yeah, this is just providing an empty framework, right? This is an example of if you were going through each segment and you were considering Q factors for each segment of your portfolio, and you wanted a framework to do it in a consistent manner, then and more than what we can provide on the interactive tool, right? In the CECLSolver tool, we're providing this as a possible way. You might consider having, 5 different categories, right? A score of -1 means there's less risk or better than historical. 0 means no real change, and then 1, 2, 3 for escalating or increasing risk. And you might define slightly minimal additional risk as a Q factor range of less than 25 bips, whereas moderate 25 to 50, and then above 50 is significant. But these are completely overrideable, modifiable. There's no intelligence behind those. It was just a starting point. And then this is an example of how you might do that. So the blue text are just us putting in some examples of how you might use it. The second tab is a clean one, where you'd make these adjustments, you'd make these notes, and you decide what these ranges are. So we're not helping you with your actual Q factor adjustment. We're just providing a way that you might do it.
Yeah.
With the tool. And this is yours to do whatever you want with, right? It's some basic, functions and calculations inside this tool, but take it, beat it up, make it your own, make notes. It's yours after you download it, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Yep. I'm going to get to Mike's chat. He's been waiting patiently for this one. This one's, again, another potential enhancement, Steve. We wrap the CECLSolver into a Word doc with Excel tables from other sources. Is there a way to include Word and Excel so all reporting comes from CECLSolver? I don't know how, if we can do that, we definitely have to talk to the IT team about it, but
well, closest thing I can think of, when we have our export options, you can choose what level of detail you want to export, whether it's just a summary of a loan portfolio summary, maybe not all these detailed historicals. You probably might want, peer data and the Q factors, probably not all those charts, and then maybe unfunded commitments, and then individually assessed loans. So this just gives you a way to, and you have 2 options, right? Excel, which is just all these tables in an Excel, or a PDF. I'm wondering if you do a PDF export, and this is something I'd have to look at, if you can lift from the PDF export to stick it into Word, to get the ball rolling. Obviously,
right.
We're not providing all the qualitative context, right? All your discussion of CECL. That's something you're typing yourself in the Word document. But I'm trying to think of the most convenient way to take these tables and get them into a Word document with the notes of any notes that you've left or anything else, right?
Yeah, and any narrative or anything else you might be wrapping in, we do have the ability for you to upload that into CECLSolver and make it part of your presentation. So kind of going the other way, Steve, we have that option as well. But Mike, it's certainly, maybe we'll jump on a call and talk through. But Steve, if you can go back and just show them on the export as well, or the oh shoot,
which thing?
Well, if you could do the file upload, right? So if Mike has narrative, that you could upload your Word doc here, right? In the upload files.
We created this functionality a while back. Not that long ago. But
if you click on that upload file button in the institution file there, right? You can pull, if you have a Word doc with some other source, you can click on that and pull something into your own.
Any associated local files that you have, whether it's you have additional documentation about Q factors like this support matrix, whether we're doing your WARMs with loan level data in an Excel file, and you just want the WARM Excel file just kind of here and accessible within the tool framework, you can upload them and warehouse them right here. But if you're just talking about taking all the pieces and getting them into one document where you can add paragraphs and that kind of stuff, then we can talk about what's the most efficient. We'll just have a separate call with you and talk about the most efficient way to screen grab or grab those tables and get them into a Word document that you can then write around, so to speak.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Great, Mike. I see the comment. Yeah, you use the file upload for now, but yeah, let's we can talk about maybe additional things that we could do. A couple other questions, Steve. Would it be possible to also add excluded quarters, quote unquote, in the look back data? With it currently set at a range, idea would be a similar drop down with an excluded quarter or multiple, which had outlier data.
Yeah, I mean, we've considered that. We've talked about that. We found that that's something that the regulators and the
Right.
auditors really don't love, because it starts to sniff of just manipulating actual lived historical experience, publicly available historical experience, right? We have ways to alter this, right? If you've calculated, let's say you have 5 years of stuff and there was one weird instance of fraud, right? And it's a big chunk and it's right in the middle of your look back period and it's bothering you to no end. You can come in here and you can do a modification of a loss rate. You can just do a wholesale change to our calculated loss rate to exclude that. You'll have to do some of the math yourself, but you can go ahead and back that out here if you want to. And maybe if we had a note function on this page, thank you for the tip, then you can make that note there.
Yeah.
You also have the ability to use the, if that's something that's a big problem for you, use the auditing tool, right? The Excel-based audit tool, which is a complete recreation of the whole historical analysis. You get this in Excel and you could go in there and just delete or back out a number and have it recalculate the whole thing as if that one number never existed. That takes a little bit of work, but we can show you how to do that. But on the automated tool, adding additional complexity to exclude specific periods of time in the middle of your look back period on a segment basis, it's certainly functionality we could do, but it becomes a little bit overly complex for the vast majority of users. And having that option right there and making it very easily accessible worries auditors and examiners that you're doing stuff that they don't know about, where you're actually manipulating what you actually experienced in the past. There are ways around it or ways to make a note of it, or a Q factor, right? You make a Q factor adjustment that you just leave there, a custom Q factor adjustment for this one segment, historical aberration, right? And you just make a -3 basis point adjustment to that segment and leave it there every quarter. And that's another way. So many ways to take care of it without changing what happened and just making a note of what happened so it doesn't affect your calculation.
Yeah, and so JP, I appreciate the follow-up comment. So he's adjusting with the Q factors, but again, if you want to look at how to do it with the Excel tool, certainly reach out to us and Steve can walk you through that. And then the final question we have is, where can we get that template for the Q factors? Again, it's in that knowledge base button. So if you click on it, and Steve's doing it right now, it's right there. You can get that template.
Yep.
Excuse me,
one thing I hadn't pointed out was, and we get some confusion about this sometimes, is on the summary tab, the executive, maybe that should just be executive summary, Sean. We have a couple columns here. This is just a quick reference so that you can compare your reserve from the scenario you're running now to some point in history, whether it's last month, last quarter, last year, whatever. But you have to choose that date. So if you're updating your scenario, right, this data is not update or overrideable. This is coming from your scenario. So this right here, this is the current scenario that you're running right now. It says March 31st because you chose March 31st as the as of date for your current scenario. We're comparing that to some historical point in time. And if you hover over this date, it says, hey, type in any quarter end date to have the tool automatically update so that you can compare it. So if I wanted to compare my current scenario to the end of last year, I would click on this and choose 12/31/23. All that does is update your ACL and your balance and your reserve ratio to be as of 12/31, so you can compare. Obviously, these are call report values, and this is me messing with a scenario, so we're not subtracting 90% of our reserve this quarter. But it would show you just the difference in balance of your ACL and the difference in loan balance between whatever this date is in the past, you can choose any historical date, and what you see in your current scenario. So that's it. Sometimes if you don't update this might be more recent than that. You have some weird stuff, or they may be of the same date, which doesn't intuitively make sense. So This is a historical period that you can choose. And if you want it to be as of last month, not a quarter end, if you do your ACL monthly, then you'll have to type in these balances. If you wanted to be this to be as of 2/28, if I can type 28/24. So if I type that in, it just remembers I typed in 2/28. Let's say these balances are 2/28 and this is 3/31. So this would be my change over the last 1 month in the tool. But again, I'd have to plug in what I had as of 2/28 from the last time I ran it. So it's just a simple, quick and dirty comparison of any two periods from a summary standpoint, but you'll have to manage the historical date so that it makes sense to you, right? You might want to do it year over year and choose 3/31/23 versus 3/21/24. And that's it. Just want to point that out because we get that a lot.
Yep. Perfect. All right, I'm going to grab back the screen as we kind of move
Yeah.
here close to the conclusion. All right, so we updated the scenarios. Steve talked about setting the common date range. We've certainly addressed questions today, so thank you for all the chats and questions that came in today. Just a reminder, both on the knowledge base, but we do have those past webinars and YouTube videos, and now coming soon Loom videos. I do understand. I think Cindy did try to log in. So it looks like Saturday, actually, Steve, for the new over the weekend we had a bug, so it looks like the ability to do the pre-population should be there tomorrow. And let's see, again, if you have been attending, or certainly encourage you to attend our IntelliCredit loan data coffee talks. We are offering a 6-month free trial. If you are looking to get more granular with your portfolio, this is an excellent tool to assist you both with even your CECL process, but also to just providing more comprehensive report capabilities and kind of mining your data. So certainly encourage you to do it, and that's part of the reason we offered the free trial, so you could actually try it on to see if it would be an improvement in your process. Upcoming, we'll have that loan data coffee talk on the 12th of July. And then we'll be back at the end of July. Steve and I'll be back for our CECL coffee talk. So, certainly encourage you to attend both of those. Another question is, how many have had an independent review of the model? So I think I don't have an offhand number. I know it's been, a fair, a pretty decent percentage, just because we often end up getting involved with questions about that. But certainly a fair. I think we may have, in a previous webinar, I think we might have polled how many have had. So I'll have to go back and look.
I mean, it's not 80%, but it's not 5%. I mean, 20-30% have had independent auditing firms do a more formal validation of it. I would say somewhere in that range, but
I think that's about right.
Yeah, but certainly a significant number of them. And if you need a resource, if you're thinking about that and want to talk about the pros and cons of it, we can do that with you. If you need to, but you haven't done it yet, and you're looking for somewhere to go, we can point you in the right direction, or we can help any way we can help.
Agreed. So again, thanks you all for attending. We appreciate the questions. I hope you found it helpful. Certainly have a happy and safe 4th of July. And Steve will be eating hot dogs. I'll be eating everything. And
you didn't. That was not a choice, Sean. All of the above was not a choice, but it should have been, and probably would have been the winner.
Yeah, I will be eating all of the above. So, and then some. So have a great weekend. Have a happy 4th of July. And Steve, any final comments before we let him go?
No, I just keep making more comments about fireworks and blowing fingers off, but I'll stick to the script. Thanks everyone for attending, and we look forward to talking with you again next month.
Agreed. Be safe, and we'll talk to you next month. See ya.
Thanks everyone.